Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started as a few people continue to walk in to the meeting here. My name is Dent Wilkins with US Squash. We're fortunate to have all of you join us tonight for the Junior Squash Forum. We should expect about 100 people tonight, which is great. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come and listen and give us feedback on the current state. So I want to take a minute to introduce our panel. We have Kevin Klipstein, who's the President and CEO of US Squash, Kim Clearkin, our Vice President of Programs and Events, and Harry Smith, our Director of Junior Development. They'll be handling both the material tonight. I will be moderating throughout the session, and we hope you find it useful. A couple quick technical details. As I said, we will be keeping everyone's audio and video down throughout the meeting. We have had a bunch of questions submitted via the question submission form ahead of the meeting. You can also submit questions on the fly with anything that comes up or any information you'd like something further on. And that can be done directly through the chat function in the Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen. You can either send those questions directly to me in the chat or feel free to put them in the public forum as well. With that said, we're looking forward to the evening. I'd like to pass it over to Kevin, who will kick off the call and get us started. All yours, Kevin.
Thank you, Dent. I'll be brief. You did forget to introduce yourself. You're Dent Wilkins, the Senior VP at US Squash. So thanks for moderating. You got the short straw and head up communication, so it makes sense. I'm sure the last thing any of us need is another Zoom call. However, we're all committed to doing everything we can to communicate broadly across multiple channels. And some prefer videos and town halls, and others taking a lot of content that we're posting on the web or sending out in our regular bulletins. We've tried a lot of different formats, from sort of open town halls to more closed ones like this format, to smaller group regional meetings with parents. So we certainly welcome your feedback on the formats that are best for engaging parents and junior families. Again, we want to make sure we're making ourselves as available as possible, answer people's questions, continue to explain what our thinking is, where we're going with all this. And we understand it's a difficult time, and we hope you and your families are well. We're certainly looking forward to a better 2021 than this year has been. And we have some really exciting projects in the pipeline for the structure of junior squash. Obviously, it's been a huge disappointment to everybody. However, we are optimistic about 2021, and we're going to continue to seek the community's input as we roll out and restart the junior structure. We also enter all of this or continue to work on this, knowing that at the end of the day, the structure isn't going to be perfect for anybody. And it's not going to satisfy everyone's needs all the time, but we are a learning organization, and that's the main reason for continuing to engage the community and gathering your feedback. So we've also seen some interesting positive signs in the return to play and return to competition, which we'll talk a little bit about here. If you're tuning in live, as Den mentioned, please offer up any questions or comments via chat. Before I hand it back, I just wanted to thank the whole US Squash staff. They've been working under some really challenging circumstances, and we've been on rolling furloughs and some pay reductions, and the level of dedication they have to the sport and the organization is really remarkable. So I want to thank them and thank our board, who provided some really great guidance to me and the whole management team, and obviously support the organization generously. So thank you for joining. Again, look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm now going to pass it over to Kim Clearkin, who will talk about the agenda and get us started here. Kim, we don't have audio for you.
First of all, I'd like to unmute myself. So the agenda for tonight, first of all, we'd really like to just kind of take you down a little bit down memory lane to what happened between about June and October this year, where we did our return to play, and just make sure everyone understands and just remembers how we got to effectively where we are now, and then really talk about the effect of that return to play and the protocols that we put in place that we thought would work during this period, and talk about like what is happening and what we're learning from that. And then I think we all need to look forward as well to next year. There is, I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I do think that we'll be able to restart the junior engine next year, and we need to plan for that so that, you know, when we see those triggers that we can start, that we're ready. So I want to talk through those 3 stages, and then at the end there'll be a Q&A session. But as Dan and Kevin have said, if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to address them. So back in June, I think it was, or July, we started a return to playing competition. We engaged a lot of the community, we engaged the teaching pros, we engaged our junior squash advisory panel, we had regional forums, we had a medical advisory committee to talk about and to try to work out how we could get squash back to playing in parts of the country where it was possible during this period of the pandemic, where we're not quite sure what states are going to do or what guidelines are going to be in place. And we came up with a system, various phases, where we started with the clubs could open because the clubs were closed at that point. So what could we do when the clubs were open? Then if the clubs are open, what could we do when they would perhaps allow other members and other people from the area to play? Then we would expand to regional play, and eventually we would get to the place where we could do national play. So we came up with an interim junior framework, which is where we are now. And for that interim junior framework, we put in place some protocols we wanted to see for health and safety. So we needed to have a system that would cater for the guidelines that were being put in place, the social distancing and the cleanliness and the hygiene. And we knew that it was going to be really important as an indoor sport to be very vigilant over what that should look like, because we knew a spotlight in the end would come upon us on making sure that we were following these protocols so that we could keep clubs open and we could keep squash being played. So we came up with the protocols for facilities that had to have the highest filtration, the highest air ventilation. We needed to make sure that we were doing our due diligence on checking that, making sure we knew who was in the facility at any point. We needed to make sure any protocols for running any events would cater for the social distancing and gathering limits that were almost certainly going to be imposed on us. And really, in terms of safety, it's not only about social distancing and the ventilation, but also about the mask wearing as well, and what we should do for players in terms of whether they should be wearing those or not, on court or off the court, what the spectators should be doing. So we had a kind of layered approach to the safety for an event. And then we looked at what types of play would be able to be played during this time, thinking not just about tournaments, but about whether we should be doing some more box leagues and ladders, a more localized play, because we thought that it would be probable that we wouldn't be able to do national play at that point. So we wanted to make sure that the system was adaptable and flexible to those ever-changing rules. We thought that the travel would still be limited. There'll be travel advisories in place that wouldn't allow us to do national play. So we really wanted a system that was flexible, adaptable, where if one part of the country was closed, another part of the country that was open could still play in some kind of capacity. In order to do that, we also wanted to use the ratings as a basis of a ranking system. It's a data point that we have that measures the playing level. And so we've been using the ratings as a basis of a ranking system. So we're in this interim junior framework. If you look at the picture on the screen, we're currently in that interim junior framework phase. We're actually still also gone back in some places to the club play, as we see some states closing again. So we have some clubs that are actually closed. So we're still really in that stage, but we at least have a framework in place to allow some activity where it's possible and allowed.
So, Kim, I think that's a good place to ask a little bit more about kind of where we are now, as far as what have events looked like up until this point. What are we seeing from protocol standpoint? How are things working? Where, you alluded to things pulling back in certain areas and moving forward in others. Can you just provide a little bit more context on where we are now?
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, where are we now? Where are we today? And where have you been since October? So it was October 7th when we started to implement the interim framework that we put in place over the summer. And it is very much as expected, I think, where we are now, in that some places in the country can play, some can compete, some can just do match play, some can do solo practice, and some are closed. But the good news, compared to March, when we had to close completely, is that some places are able to play and some kids are allowed to be on court. So it's not unexpected where we are now, but we have learned quite a few things along the way. We've had to adapt the guidelines and the protocols that we thought would be in place based upon the ever-changing rules and guidelines coming out from the states. So, things like cohorting, we've had to adapt some of our events to be able to cope with a cohorting structure, meaning keeping the kids all together and playing each other and not interacting with other, say, divisions or other people in an event. We need to be careful about what we mean by a tournament. What is a tournament? Is it just match play, or is it really a tournament? The words that we use and the way that we frame the play that is going on, we need to look at the guidelines of the state and make sure that we're still adhering to what they want to see. So there's a slight change of mindset, I think, in that it isn't just about tournaments anymore. And back in March, we are very much on a tournament train. So there's a little bit of a change into what it is, what meaningful play means in this environment. In terms of the facilities, it's been very encouraging. I think all the facilities have taken the guidelines extremely seriously. 38 facilities have gone through our self-certification process, meaning that they have confirmed that they have the right standards of filtration, ventilation, sanitization. They're following the protocols, and they are hosting some accredited events. That involves 12 states. So I find that very encouraging, that the facilities are prepared to go that extra mile and pay anything extra to upgrade their facilities to be able to host some squash as safely as possible. So what have we learned by that? I think another thing that we've learned as well along the way about our facilities is, it's great that they're very serious about this, but in terms of things like live streaming and technology, I think we can improve and help facilities upgrade their technology during this time. Obviously, live streaming is definitely advantageous, where we might have to limit people who are allowed into a facility. So I think a learning lesson for us there is to talk to facilities about that part of what they have. In terms of events, we've held 75 events who are listed on the calendar. They're a combination of tournaments and college showcases, but also we've had some leagues. We've got box leagues and ladders going as well, which are not included in that number. We're seeing an increasing amount of in-club play, or some match play, or some round robins and clinics and camps. So again, it's much more of a variety of play that's on offer, and it's much more localized and regionalized than it has been before. A couple of examples that I really like. There's one down in Maryland where there's a league that's being played, a junior league. We got like 36 kids playing, which I think is great, 6 teams of 6. We also have a school up in Cleveland, and they are not playing any other school right now, but within that school they have about 36 to 40 kids, and they have a little league going for those kids. So they're not allowed to play anyone else, but within their own environment, they've created some really nice match play, which I think is great, and we can take that. Maybe we should be doing more of that during the normal season as well. What I think I'm also seeing, and is very encouraging, is there's a lot more engagement, it seems, down at the starter levels or lower levels of play. So the lower rating divisions are filling in the events that we have, whereas the higher level divisions are not. But I think it's great to see these kids playing and having a lot of fun. So the system that we have in terms of the events, I think, can work. It can provide meaningful play. It's not necessarily perfect, but there are definitely some positive things coming out of that. In terms of the operations of the events, we have to really be cognizant of what the states are saying in terms of the gathering limits. We got to make sure that we only have a certain number of people in a facility at any one time. And also we got to be careful about people congregating. So, and normally when you think of a tournament, you think of this chaos many people around, or talking to each other, or talking to the referees, or talking to their kids. Many people hanging out at the tournament, and we can't do that anymore. So when we're talking about a tournament or event now, it's very much arrive, play, leave. You can't have people just hanging out, but it's working quite well, and everyone is adhering to these protocols pretty well too. So we can have the arrive, play, leave. We can have one division at a time. We've only got one referee, or any referee, depending upon what the state says. The one referee system's working well, and we're finding that as the states right now are reducing their gathering limits and reducing the amount of people who are allowed to gather, being an individual sport has its advantages. Having a gathering limit of 10 is fine in a 5-court facility. There's 2 people on a court. So we can function with these guidelines in place where we have to just do our activity and leave again. So it seems to me people generally do want to play, do want to find a way to play. And it seems many people are quite appreciative of the efforts we're making where we can. But there are obviously concerns for people who can't play right now, who look across and go, well, what about me? Like, I can't play. That's not fair, because people are getting a chance to improve their ranking or improve their rating, and I'm not able to do that. So there are definitely some concerns out there about the way things are. I don't think that anyone right now should feel compelled to play. Just because there's a tournament or an event on the calendar doesn't mean that you have to play it. It doesn't mean you're at a disadvantage if you don't play in it. But there's a lot of concern over the ratings and rankings. And what I'd like to do now is to just turn it over to Harry, who's our resident expert in the ratings and rankings, to talk a little bit about the change in mindset required to go from a points-based system to a ratings-based system, and how that works, and how you should be thinking about it when you're looking at whether you should play or not, or what type of play you should be involved in, if you can. So Harry, could you please try and explain the rating system to everyone?
Yeah, I will. I'll do my best at least. I'm sure many of you on this call have heard me kind of run through the ratings multiple times at this point since this past March. But before getting into the actual ranking systems, the differences between ratings versus the points that we've always had in the past, I wanted to give a quick overview of the ratings. So ratings are a number that have always come alongside points, averages, and player rankings in the past. But this past September or October, I believe, is the first time that we've actually tied player ratings to their actual rankings. So at the junior level. So in the abstract, a player rating is just a long-term numerical representation of each player's ability when looking at the entire universe of squash players that are recording results in the system. It's a unified scale that is comparable across all ages, genders, and geographies. So is reliant on crossover of players from various areas playing amongst each other. And it's on a scale of roughly 0 to 7.75 for the top players in the world. So how do players get ratings? They need to record at least one win and one loss against another rated player in the system, which matches count towards a player's rating. Any match that's recorded. So it can be a tournament match, it can be a friendly match, it can be a league, box, league, ladder. Any match that is recorded in the system goes into a player's, or is factored into a player's rating calculation. So the actual calculation itself is quite intricate and advanced, and is effectively a weighted average of all matches recorded within the past 45 months, with the heaviest weights being placed on matches played from the past 15 months. So something to note about the past 15 months is that due to the fact that effectively result entry through Club Locker and the US squash system dropped to very low levels, if not zero, between March and mid-September, that 15 months, or sorry, that 6-month period is not factored into the 15-month calculation. So it's not fully ignored because there were some matches that were played in that time period, but it was consolidated to 1 day. So effectively, we can think about it today as the past 21 months having the highest weight. But so how does the weighted average work? The algorithm starts with looking at the differential between the player A and player B in their ratings, which then assigns an expected outcome to the match. And I guess in the most simple form, it's the players that exceed the expected outcome of said match will show an improvement in their player ratings. So that's the main component, but then there are additional weights that are factored into the algorithm, which apply the various weights. Those are, so the competitiveness of a match. So was a match won 3-0, 3-1, 3-2? Time degradation. So how old is the result? So matches that were played yesterday or today are weighted much more heavily than a match played 3 weeks ago, or 45 months ago for that matter. And then the reliability of a rating. So what that means is players that have more results in the system, they have more data points for the algorithm to take into account, and therefore the rating is believed to be more accurate or more reliable. So players who have more results in the system within the past 45 months will see a more stable rating. So any one match result won't have a massive impact because, again, it is a weighted average of all results from the past 45 months. And then, so that's just looking at kind of an individual's player history. And then the algorithm also looks at the tangential results. So not just my results against direct opponents, but the results that my opponents have against their history of players as well, which is why one of the reasons you can actually see fluctuations, small fluctuations in the 100th of a point to 200th of a point on a weekly basis, just because, even if you're not playing, is because the algorithm does look at every time it calculates, it goes back to the beginning of results within the past 45 months and recalculates everything. So why are ratings so important at the moment? It's because, as we said at the beginning of this, as Kim said, we've made a transition in early October to base the junior rankings on player ratings rather than the point system, which we've used for the past 10, 15 years or so. So this actually does require a bit of a change in mindset to have a full understanding of what the rankings actually mean and how individuals should be interpreting them. So the point system was a system that, and I'll also say that the both systems have their pros and cons. The transition to a ratings-based system was effectively a response to the situation that's currently going on with coronavirus. It does allow us, the ratings are a long-term gauge, as I said, and they are fairly accurate. So they do allow us to provide a ranking system to the junior community in this time period where competition is incredibly localized or mostly localized, which has its own complications in trying to create a national ranking system for players who are all over the country. So the points-based system itself, it has required participation in a subset of accredited tournaments. So as I said, the ratings, any result that goes in the system is factored into a player's rating. Versus for the points-based system, players need to participate in gold, silver, bronze tournaments, JCTs, national championships, or regional championships in order to aggregate points that lead to a point average and a ranking. The points-based system looks at just a subset of the tournaments that a player has participated in, taking the best 4 results as measured by the points earned. So if a player has played in 8 tournaments, let's say, only their top 4 count, again, versus the ratings where every single match that goes in the system within the past 45 months is factored into that algorithm. The time horizon is different. So for the points-based system, the points stay active for only 11 months, which does help to promote the participation of players to actively play in the junior system. And also allows for more rapid mobility, because with the participation, there's tournaments that are coming in, tournaments that are dropping off, versus the 45-month time horizon of the ratings. And the points are awarded based on a player's performance in tournaments, and therefore they are a great snapshot of a player's recent performance in tournaments, whereas the player's rating is a good long-term reflection of a player's ability based on all results that they have entered into the system or have been entered into the system through tournaments or leagues and box leagues. So the tournaments, the points-based system, it matters more the points you earn. So the tournaments you participate in, the round you get to, and therefore the points you earn, not necessarily the individual players that you're recording results against. So the ratings, they look at specifically player A, player B, the differential, the expected outcome, the actual outcome, and those weights that I mentioned a moment ago. And so again, they're different systems, and they should be looked at in slightly different ways. They are both a great means of providing a ranking system, but again, the player ratings, they allow for a longer term measure of a player's ability, and the points based is a more real-time snapshot of a player's performance in recent tournaments. So again, the transition to the ratings based ranking system is a response to the current situation where we aren't able to host this national tournament system, which we have for the past X number of years. And I felt it was important to provide some context on the differences between those two systems. One question that we have been getting frequently is, how can I improve my player rating? And unfortunately, the simple answer, the simplest answer, is to play often, play well, and to be patient. And by that, what I mean is because the ratings are a weighted average of all results that a player has played in the past 45 months. And the more matches a player has played, the more reliable or stable their rating is, which means it's less likely to large fluctuations. Any one result isn't necessarily going to cause a large weekly fluctuation, increase or decrease, the more a player participates. So what players need to be doing is focusing more on that long-term trend line of their player ratings. There's going to be up weeks and down weeks in pretty small increments, but in general, over time, the junior players and squash players in general will have an upward trend in their player rating. So there unfortunately isn't necessarily a quick fix to how can I bump my rating 1 point this month. So it's the most important component of that is to get on court and play, and to be patient with it. Over time, if you're playing, you're putting in the work, you're going to see an upward trajectory in your player rating.
Thanks, Harry. One piece of context I'd like to provide too, and this plays to one of the questions we received, is in the past rating system we had, which was active up until, I believe, 2013 is the correct date, which was based off an ELO algorithm. People could see directly, it was a simpler calculation, and people could see, okay, going into the match, I'm rated this, my opponent is rated this, and I know if I win, I will go up this much and she will go down that much, or if I lose, I will go down this much and she will go up this much. That's obviously great to be able to kind of know that going in and see it. The newer algorithm, which was developed by a team of experts in Virginia who do this kind of as a company for deep kind of dives in the data science side, is a more complex and interrelated algorithm, which has the benefits of one being more accurate and are basically what you would call a prediction percentage. So of the algorithm saying, okay, the higher rated player is winning that match is about 10 percentage points higher than our old algorithm. And the second thing it does is the current algorithm is much better at comparing different groups of players and tying them together due to individual small connections. So you could have a large group of players from Ohio, a large group of players from San Francisco, a large group of players from DC, and even one or two crossover matches between players of those groups, then accurately reset the ratings of the different groups so that they relate with each other and are an accurate measure across countries. And that also applies across genders and across age ranges. So as we encourage league play with adults, with juniors, boys playing girls, vice versa, it means that the rating system is able to much more accurately account for that. So unfortunately, what I've run into in my own pursuit of a higher rating is that I need to get better at squash to get a higher rating, and I'm going the opposite direction right now. But since your kids are going the opposite way, you know, if they keep playing, stay engaged, their rating will continue to improve. I encourage people to submit a few more ratings questions. I've got one or two that have come into me, which we'll address in a second. Before we do that, one of the questions, Kim, I got sent to me directly here was around mask use specifically. I know it's been a big topic of discussion, both within our committees, but also just around the junior community. And people were just wondering kind of what's been the reaction to that, how has it been going? And, you know, I think you sit at the nexus of talking with a lot of pros and families and others, so it'd be good to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, definitely. And as people know, for accredited play, players need to wear a face mask that covers your nose and your mouth. And we've had several discussions with the teaching pro community to try to work out whether there's a standard that we can use or how that's going and how it's being met by the junior players and the adult players. And what I'm hearing from them is that the junior players are getting used to wearing those face masks. It's like second nature now to those who have been playing with a mask since perhaps June. The best ones seem to be the surgical masks. And some people are taking a lead from the PSA, where I don't know if you've all seen how they take a box onto the court now with a towel. Well, now they're just taking several spare masks onto the court so that if the mask becomes sweaty and wet, they can just change it. But the kids are doing very well. There seems to be sometimes a problem in a tournament situation where after a long rally, then the kids bring their mask down below their nose, and so any tournament director just has to be a little vigilant and just remind them that it needs to cover their nose as well. But in general, I think it's going well, and the kids are doing a really, really good job of trying to adhere to wearing them, which is really pleasing, I think. But the adult players are finding it a lot harder to be able to wear the masks. I think some of them are trying, but I know it is a lot harder for them to get used to. I think if anyone has any questions about the mask, let me know. There's some best practices as well about, well, if you're wearing a mask, what do you do about your glasses? Because if you're wearing like normal glasses, they tend to fog up. And I know some of the pros have some great products out that they found where they've had some tape, which you tape your mask down so it's here, so there's no air that can go up onto your glasses. There's some anti-fog spray that some people use. So it is possible to wear normal eyewear, like ASTM approved eyewear, with a face mask if you use some of these other things to help to stop the fogging. Many people are also using the original eye mask, which is the visor which goes across your eyes, and that one doesn't fog up. The important one there is to note that you have to get the original eye mask because that's the only ASTM approved eyewear that we have. Any other face shield is not appropriate. It's not ASTM approved, and a face shield also is not acceptable as a replacement for a face mask either. So most people are getting used to it though, which I say is very encouraging. Kids are playing. No one seems to be complaining too much. Everyone's trying to work out how to make it work for them. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Kim. Looping back to ratings, one of the questions we had, I think already in such a geographically dispersed country and playing population, there are big differences in the amount that people can engage in the amount of tournaments or league play, the types of matches they can play, and so on. That's only been exacerbated, obviously, by the current situation, everyone being in different both personal situations and situations within their state and region. So as it pertains to the ratings, and I'll throw this one over to you, Harry, I think we've had questions from both sides, people saying, I'm worried about playing too, I've got the opportunity to play, I'm worried about playing too much because it's going to have dramatic effects on my rating. And on the other side, people saying, well, we're in a geographically isolated area, don't have as many competitive opportunities, and I'm worried about, you know, whether that's going to hurt my rating as we kind of move into the future. So can you address kind of how the system approaches both of those situations?
Yeah, definitely. So the rating algorithm is actually fairly, it protects against both situations in a pretty good way. So what I mean by protects both situations is in that first case, as I mentioned when I was going through the calculation a moment ago, is that the more matches a player plays, the more quote unquote stable or reliable their rating is. And therefore it's less likely to see large swings. So by participating more, recording more results through Club Locker onto your US Squash account, you're effectively making your rating more reliable and more stable. So you're less likely to see that one match or those one or two matches that'll have an outsized impact on either in a positive or negative way to your ratings, to a player rating. On the flip side, for those players that are unable to participate right now, either for health concerns or just access to competition, a player's rating doesn't drop off too rapidly. Again, it's a 45-month window. There are weights on the match results, which it does weight more heavily or most heavily in the past 15 months. But so if a player isn't participating at the moment or hasn't been able to participate since March, they likely wouldn't have seen a significant change in their rating in that time period. But if they're not playing right now, that just means that their rating is based on fewer match results and fewer recent match results, which means that when they do start playing again, they're likely to see some slightly larger jumps in player rating on a weekly basis until they've quote unquote found their level again from the rating standpoint.
Thanks, Harry. I think we'll have a couple more questions, likely comment about current state that we'll address as we get to the end of the Q&A as well. And I'm sure there will be more questions that we won't be able to get to tonight. And I do want to emphasize that we'll continue to follow up with people on questions, and you're welcome to contact us directly after the fact and use our online resources to gather more information. I do want to make sure we have enough time and transition into kind of what's next. I think everyone these days is enjoying looking forward more than reflecting on what the pandemic's brought us. So Kim, I'll pass it over to you, and it'd be great to hear a little bit more about the process that we're going to go through over the coming months as we are thinking towards a transition towards national play again when that's possible. But you're muted again, sorry.
That's your fault, Dan. You think I'd have learned by now the number of Zoom calls that we've all been on that we should unmute before trying to talk, but it still happens. So the plan for the return to national competition, and as Dan says, I shouldn't, but I keep reading the news and seeing how some states are closing down, and it all seems very depressing at the positivity rates are going up. But actually, I think that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there is some optimism here and some hope. And you know, if the vaccines seem to be successful, and hopefully they'll be rolling out over the first quarter of next year. And we would hope that that would mean that we could start to really think about getting back to some kind of national competition. And so thinking on a timeline, we need to think about, well, what does that mean? What national framework do we want to put in place so we're ready for when that time comes? So we really need to think about what is the system that we want to be going back to, or going forward to even, rather than back to. What does that look like? And how do we get to that system from where we are now? And so over the coming months, we need to really address those questions. I think this is a great time for us to step back a bit and go, what just happened in the 2019-20 season? We made all those changes. It seems like such a long time ago. There were a lot of concerns about the changes we made, and the system that was in place definitely wasn't perfect. In fact, this time last year, Harry and I were going through some of the concerns that everybody had to try to work out how we would adjust the system for this season. And then the pandemic happened, but still those concerns are still valid, and there's still things that we need to be looking at when we think about what that system will look like. So what are the good things that we had? What are the things that need to be improved? But at the same time, we're learning a lot now about the rating system and how that seems to be engaging different parts of the community and how regionalization can work. And so are these things that we should bring to the table as well when we think about what that new system should look like? So there's plenty of questions and plenty of discussion to be had about what we should be going to. Also, operationally, we've adjusted the way we run tournaments. So there are any of these things that we've been doing now that we want to take forward to the future that would improve the experience for everybody. So as I said, a lot of questions to be asked from different parts of the community to try to answer those questions. And then when we have figured out what we want to go to, we need to figure out how do we get there. We're on a ratings-based system now. We had a point system, say, a year ago, and we want to go to something to be determined. So we do need to work out what does that transition period look like. So I definitely feel there will be a transition period of however long, giving people time to get back into playing. It's not just a switch on, oh great, it's March 1st, April 1st, whenever we're back to a point system and everyone off you go playing, because some people haven't been able to play during this time. So how much time do we have to give as a playing in period? How long is that transition period? The summer is around, how does that factor into the equation? So we need to work all of these questions out. And I'm not going to give you an answer today if you were hoping for an answer today. But what I would like to say is that we need everyone's input into how we get to those answers and to those plans. And so just like last time, we'll be setting up some time to talk to families regionally. We'll be talking to the pros, we're talking to our medical advisory committee as well to work out what this system looks like and how do we get there. So everybody, please, your input is really valuable. So hopefully you'll be able to join those calls when they come. And if you give any thought or have any thoughts as to what's good and what we should be keeping and what we should be doing, let us, obviously let us know. And then another question we need to answer is, how do we know when we can start that transition? What are the kind of triggers that we need to see in place for us to say, yeah, we know that the national system is going to be able, we're going to be able to do that. We can start that transition period now. And I think it's going to be things like, are the travel advisories lifted? What is the impact of the vaccines going to be? So we need to answer so many questions, but I think we know what those questions are to be answered. So over the next probably 2 months, we'll be going through a series of calls and a series of recommendations to come up with a final proposal for how we move forward. And key to all of this is making sure that everybody understands what we're doing, understands the process, and we communicate it to you so you all can make your plans as well, because you'll want to know what that looks like, that system, so that you can make sure that you set yourselves up as well and your junior players. So the next steps there for us are to just put some timelines on that plan and to start the process of the calls and start to jump into answering some of these questions we have.
Kim, I'll jump in here and add a little bit to that. From a process point of view, when you refer back to, like we did last time, I think what you're really talking about is, as we worked through how to respond to coronavirus through the summer, we engaged the junior advisory panel. We developed regional groups of parents. We have our Teaching Pro Advisory Committee. We have a Medical Advisory Committee. So we'll engage all of those groups again. And I think from a facility and a protocols point of view, we're pretty clear in terms of what the expectations need to be. And there's a trove of information on the website, and each region likely will be a little bit different from a timing perspective. This process will probably be a little bit more technical in terms of looking at how we can build off learnings from last season and the changes that we made in the structure and the point structure, but then also learn from what we've experienced just in the last few months from the rating system. So, from a time frame perspective, we had talked about sort of going through running that process again through probably the end of February. So I don't think people can expect kind of a national rollout plan before then, but what people can expect is to sort of be asked to engage at a pretty technical level in terms of what we're thinking about. And part of the reason I bring that up is we've been through this before. Dent mentioned we had the prior ELO algorithm up until 2013. Starting in 2010, we determined that a points-based system would be better for junior squash, particularly because the ELO rating system had rankings popping from 10th in the country to 40th to 35 to 60 to 5 week to week. So it was responsive, but a little bit too responsive. And so we worked for about 2 years on how to roll out a points-based system and evolved it over the last many years. So we've got a lot of learnings on that. And, I have a lot of confidence that we will get it right in terms of the 2021-2022 season from a roll-on for a points-based system, but then also offer opportunities on the ratings-based system. So for example, some of the things we've talked about are an open national championship based on ratings sometime in the fall. So, I'm not committing us to anything at this point, but I'm just putting it out there to say there are a number of things that we're really excited about. We're going to be really inclusive in the process for teaching pros and families and making sure we roll something out fairly, obviously safely, and we're continuing to focus on that. And we've got some great opportunities ahead. And I just want to end sort of my little comment about one thing, Kim, that you just said about what just kind of redefining what meaningful play means. And I think that's important, that it might not affect people's families directly, people who are on this call, because probably tend to have more skilled and experienced players. But the fact that there are a lot of entry-level players playing and competing in small events that with ratings as low as 1 is really important, because it just kind of expands our minds in terms of how we can approach engaging people from beginner all the way through the high performance level. And what we hear from coaches all the time and from top players and from players from other countries is the experimentation, the innovation, the creativity from playing players of different ages and different levels, and juniors playing against adults is extremely valuable. So, trying to look at the silver lining in all of this to say, if you have an opportunity to do it safely, to play all sorts of different kinds of players and different kinds of formats with a little less of a formal structure, can have really huge benefits. Not the least of which is just sort of playing for the love of the game, which if you don't have that, players can really struggle, especially as juniors. So we know it's a difficult time, but we see a lot of positives evolving, and we have a lot of confidence in being able to leg into something in the second half of next year.
Kim, Kevin touched on this a little bit about nationals. We have had various questions come in about nationals for the 2021 kind of time frame. Can you give insight on kind of where we are in the thinking process around changes in formats, date potentials, and so on? I assume I don't need to go to the U.S. Junior Open in 2 weeks, so beyond that, it'd be good to know.
Yeah, so silver lining. I don't have to look at the weather forecast this time of year to see if there's an impending snowstorm, or worry about that. Yeah, the nationals for next year. I'm not sure if everyone saw that recently. We did post that the nationals for next year were postponed indefinitely. That doesn't mean that they're not going to happen. It just means really we don't know yet exactly when they will happen, and we'll continue to monitor the situation to see when would be the appropriate time. And part of that is like how would they look? And Kevin mentioned we've been thinking about doing an open tournament based on ratings for seeding, which could be an option for us. We could do that at what the appropriate time of year when people have had enough time to play in a game, play into the system. So certainly for the junior nationals, we would like, and we definitely hope to be scheduling that next year. We're just not sure when yet, but look out for more information on that from us as things become clearer, which I hope they will over the next, couple of months. I think we'll find out a lot. So look out for more communication.
On the Kevin, I want to throw to you for a second. Just briefly, we had a couple questions on national team, and I know it involves a smaller group, but you're in touch with various of the world and regional national governing bodies around what these competitions might look like or not coming up. Can you just provide context on where we are with national team and selection?
Sure. So we're obviously as disappointed as all the kids who are aspiring towards competing on the national team this summer for 2020. We hope to, at the very least, name a team, even if they don't have an opportunity to compete at the world level as a junior player. World Squash Federation actually has its annual meeting this Saturday, virtually. And they've just recently announced that the World Masters will skip 2021 and be in 2022. They haven't been declarative in terms of plans for next summer for the Junior World Championships. So we believe we have an excellent system to evaluate people's capabilities in the rating system. Obviously, if kids are not competing and training for that or not able to, that's a serious hindrance. So it's too early to tell for 2021. And we'll just have to monitor if and whether these events will be hosted. I can say, and I'll just add that it's really fortuitous that we have the Spectre Center coming online. This is a 20-court facility on the campus of Drexel University, 2 blocks from Amtrak and within walking distance to about another 20 courts. And the fact that we'll control the facility in its entirety will really help us establish a home for Team USA players early next year. Court should be playable by February, have some soft opening in March, but then also be able to provide opportunities for some national competitions over time into next summer. And we will never close the door if we don't need to in terms of middle school championships or high school championships. If there's a way we can engage a meaningful enough number of schools in a competition within the academic year, we will definitely do so, and we will have a place to host it. On the collegiate side of things, many of the leagues have canceled. Ivy League is canceled. NESCAC is probably going to be in-state competition, if at all. The Liberty League canceled. So it's increasingly unlikely that there will be any sort of meaningful collegiate play other than some small dual matches, unlikely a national championship. We'll let CSA decide, if they can salvage something, but it's not looking good. But again, from a middle and a high school perspective, we're going to do everything we can, and we're certainly not going to close the door on that at any time soon. So, long and short of it is, it's obviously been a really difficult year. We have so much to look forward to as a sport in 2021. We've got a great asset in the Spectre Center. The rating system, while not perfect and very different, I think will give us a really solid jumping off point into a new points-based ranking system once we can engage in national play. So there is a lot to look forward to, and I think we all just need to rally and keep our chins up over the next few months.
Thanks, Kevin. I think as we get towards 9, that's a great way to end. We obviously have more questions that have come in online and other places, which we'll continue to address directly to the community. We encourage you to go to our the website, ussquash.org, take a look where all the relevant information around COVID, return to play, facility resources, player resources, not to mention your own player profiles, and keep an eye on the website for updates. We'll continue to communicate with the community actively, as Kevin, Kim, and Harry mentioned, through the next several months as we plan for the return to kind of more national competition as the situation allows. I want to share at the end as kind of a closing salvo as I thank Kevin and Kim and Harry for all their hard work on this, and all of you for spending an hour of your night with us tonight. I will just share the current image of the Spectre Center that Kevin mentioned. So you can see we've got singles courts, doubles courts in the background, and the stands are up. The framing started yesterday for the glass courts, which are going to go up in the middle. So we can't wait to host all of you there as soon as we possibly can in 2021. And for those of you that have been playing actively, we hope you've been enjoying being back in court. And for those of you that aren't able to at this point, we're looking forward to when you can be. So thanks to the panel. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. And we hope everyone enjoys their evening.
Thanks, Dent. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Harry.